what this war in Europe has shown us. It's bloody, vicious, and at the end of the day, it comes down to the infantrymen on the ground. So we're going to have to invest more in our land forces, who have been woefully underinvested in the last 10 to 15 years, to make sure that we can play our role in NATO in future deployments, deterring future Russian aggression.
Throughout the programme, we've been assessing the biggest challenges awaiting Rishi Sunak, from the NHS to strike action and the small issue of maintaining harmony within his party. There's lots to be across, but we can't overlook the ongoing war in Ukraine and the careful negotiation of Western allies to support the front line. Lord Dannatt is a crossbench peer and former head of the British Army. Good morning to you.
Hello, good morning.
What's your view on the role that the UK needs to play in the conflict over the coming weeks and months? What does Rishi Sunak need to be mindful of?
Well, I think Rishi Sunak has to continue the movement that Boris Johnson started, which was to give steadfast support to Ukraine. Indeed, amongst the European members of NATO, or the European community members themselves, the UK has been out front in giving support to Ukraine. And we have been able to support that to the greatest extent that we can by providing them weapons, ammunition, and training, particularly training. We've trained so far upwards of 6,000 Ukrainian infantrymen in this country, giving them an intense course in how to fight their enemy and then sending them back to the front line. So that's really, really important that we continue to do that. And also to make sure by bilateral conversations that we maintain the unity of NATO, we maintain the unity of the West, and particularly keep the United States as engaged as possible. It's the intervention and support from Uncle Sam that has made the biggest contribution to the Ukrainian capability. So Rishi Sunak must be prepared to spend time to take the lead to make sure that Europe and the West stay united and the Americans are on board.
Yeah, Sunak made a series of calls to world leaders after he was made Prime Minister, and one of the longest, the Sunday Times reports, was to Zelensky. And they discussed at length the war, and there was a suggestion there that perhaps President Zelensky had been cautious, had needed convincing about Rishi Sunak's dedication to the cause. Apparently, Boris Johnson had told Zelensky that Sunak tried to cut military aid to Ukraine when he was Chancellor. So maybe some trepidation from the president of Ukraine there. Does Rishi Sunak need to demonstrate his faith in the cause? Do you think he'll have to commit to some spending in order to try and convince Zelensky that he's serious about this and that he's in it for the long term?
Well, it's really important that he does persuade Zelensky and the Ukrainian people that he and the United Kingdom does remain foursquare behind them. That would be most unfortunate if that was not the case. But you also mentioned the question of spending. Well, when he was Chancellor, he was obviously looking very carefully at the nation's finances. And we've seen the absolute upheaval and confusion that's been caused during the 44 days of the Liz Truss premiership. And I think there is a wider point here, and that is that the integrated review of our foreign security and defence policy that was published in March last year, it's now intended to refresh that document. And I think that's really important that it's done. But what is really important, it's not just given to the same officials and ministers who produced it the last time, published it in March last year, that there's external scrutiny of that. I think we need to get think tanks and academia involved in this to make sure that the United Kingdom's defence and security and foreign policy is fit for this part of the 21st century. And by that, what I'm really meaning is I'm questioning the tilt towards the Indo-Pacific that was in that review that came out last year. With a bloody war in Europe at the present moment, then I think our focus quite rightly should be on our Euro-Atlantic relations, particularly on Europe itself. And I think that, well, I know that translates into an increase, maybe just about now a modest increase in our defence expenditure. And of course, we need to go on investing in high-end technologies, cyber, digital, information gathering, precision targeting, all those things. But I'm afraid what this war in Europe has shown us, it's bloody, vicious, and at the end of the day, it comes down to the infantrymen on the ground. So we're going to have to invest more in our land forces, who have been woefully underinvested in the last 10 to 15 years, to make sure that we can play our role in NATO in future deployments, deterring future Russian aggression.
Yeah, he's also got a Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, who's hinted he may resign if defence spending doesn't go up to 3% of GDP. So there's a slight pressure there as well. The threat of nuclear action, that has been taken seriously, isn't it, by the West? What conversations will Rishi Sunak be having about that, and how does he get involved on the world stage with that discussion?
Well, of course, we have to take the nuclear threat seriously, and the West's response to the threat by Putin and his acolytes is that we remain ambiguous about what we would do. And ambiguity is an important part of deterrence. If the other side knows what you would do in a particular series of events, then they can calculate what their response would be. So being ambiguous is not just fudging the issue, actually, it is an important part of deterrence. And I think we have to keep very much in mind that Putin might use a tactical nuclear weapon on the battlefield. That is part and parcel of former Soviet military doctrine, now Russian military doctrine. But if you just stop and think about it for a while, what are the circumstances that he might do that? Let's suggest that there is another Ukrainian breakthrough in the Kherson area, as there was in the Kharkiv area earlier in the autumn, and that there is an onrush of Ukrainian troops. That might be the moment that he might choose to use a tactical nuclear weapon. But he would be doing so on land that they have now annexed and have called Russian. So he would be irradiating a 3, 4, 5 square kilometer area of what he calls Russian soil,
Yeah.
which would make it uninhabitable for years to come. Does he really want to do that?
Yeah.
One has to just bear the practicalities in alongside the rhetoric.
And finally, the Mail on Sunday, Lord Dannatt reports today that Liz Truss's personal phone was hacked by agents suspected of working for the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Is there a discussion needed about security within government use of message services like WhatsApp? We don't know the information that was taken, but is there a discussion that needs to be had? Are you concerned that security breaches are perhaps easier than they should be at the moment?
Security and tight security, which is really important to government, is a matter of discipline. And frankly, our leaders must be sufficiently disciplined to only communicate through authorized means, which themselves are encrypted and are secure. We've seen it with Suella Braverman apparently sending messages that she shouldn't have done on a personal email, and now we get it with Riz Truss. This, frankly, is not good enough. If these people aspire to be in senior positions of leadership, they've got to be disciplined, they've got to follow the rules, or frankly, we'll put other people in their place.
Liz Truss was in a position of leadership. She didn't aspire to be, of course. She was our Prime Minister, albeit for a short amount of time. Are you saying people like our Prime Minister should not be using message services like WhatsApp? We know about the personal email issues, but I'm sure that there are lots of messages flying on different messages services which might cause concern to someone who's been in your position.
Well, you can use your personal email to ring the housekeeper and say, could you put the cat out? I'm going to be home late. That's absolutely fine. But if you want to communicate government business, use an encrypted handheld device, use a secure telephone line, use a secure means of communication. People in senior positions have got access to these secure means of communicating, and they should use them. Not doing so is ill-disciplined and reflects very poorly on their judgment. And I come back to using that word discipline. It reflects poorly on their personal self-discipline.
Thank you so much for speaking to us. Valid insight there. Lord Dannatt, crossbench peer and former head of the British Army. Thank you.